Good morning and welcome to Smith Wilkinson's panel discussion, which will focus on the role of the Chief Insurance Officer in InsurTech. Joining me today are Braden Davis from Jetty. Braden is the Chief Insurance Officer for Jetty, where he's helping build a new financial services company for everyday renters. Jetty gives renters easier and more affordable access to rental homes while helping property managers drive occupancy, reduce costs, and streamline operations. Braden's also responsible for Jetty's insurance activities, including product and portfolio strategy, carrier relations, underwriting, policy administration, and claims oversight. Braden also oversees Jetty's multi-channel customer support activities. Prior to joining Jetty, Braden held roles as Head of Strategy at QBE North America and Head of Business Transformation for QBE's Standard P&C. Prior to joining QBE, Braden was with McKinsey, where he was responsible for several engagements with leading companies in the financial services industry, with a particular focus on property and casualty insurance. Welcome, Braden. Next, we have Jackie Morales from Bestow. Jackie Morales is the Chief Insurance Officer at Bestow, a leading life insurance technology company, democratizing access to innovative financial solutions. She's a two-time graduate of Southern Methodist University with an undergraduate degree in humanities and an MBA with a specialty in finance. Prior to joining Bestow, Jackie was with LGA as their Chief Operating Officer. In her more than 20 years' experience as a life insurance executive, she has focused on advancements in digital innovation, systems hardware, and software design and upgrades, and has been a driver of the use of data analytics to improve the customer experience. She has worked for Americo Life, UICI, Lincoln Financial Group, and AXA. Welcome, Jackie. Finally, we have Kate Terry from Surround Insurance. Kate Terry is co-founder and Chief Insurance Officer at Surround Insurance. She has 12 years of insurance product management experience in both personal and commercial lines of Progressive, Plymouth Rock, and most recently at Liberty Mutual, where she was a Senior Vice President in the Commercial Product Management Group for 6 years. Kate is a licensed agent, surplus lines broker, and a chartered property and casualty underwriter. She has a bachelor's degree in history and Celtic studies from Harvard College and an MBA from Harvard Business School. Welcome, Kate. Excellent. Kate, we'll start with you.
Great.
Kate, the title Chief Insurance Officer is unique to the InsurTech vertical. When someone asks what you do, what is your cocktail party response?
Well, I do try not to talk about insurance at cocktail parties. But what I try to tell people is that Chief Insurance Officer in the InsurTech space is actually both a broad role and a fairly technical role. So at Surround, my role spans everything from underwriting to pricing to coverage selections, reinsurance, and customer support. So there's a lot of breadth there, but there's also quite a lot of technical insurance knowledge that's necessary for the role as well. So it's really interesting in that way. The range of activities is super broad, but you also have to be able to go really deep into each of those areas.
Wonderful. Jackie, how would you respond to this question?
So like Kate, it's hard to talk about insurance at a cocktail party. It's a great way to drive people away because they think you want to sell them a policy. But you know what I tell people is we're creating the future. We're doing something few people have the opportunity to do, which is start from scratch and change an industry that's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. So it's really exciting when you get to tell people that you're changing the future.
Great. How about you, Braden?
Well, at cocktail parties, I like to lead by telling people I'm a professional risk taker. Usually opens it up for a different conversation. But in reality, very much the technical role. So when people ask, we make the donuts. It's all the little bits and the technical pieces that operate behind the scene. But bigger than that, and similar to sort of another answer, is it's very much about modernizing the product, identifying sort of what the consumer need really is and crafting something with our technical tools and resources to solve that problem.
Great, kind of a customer backward approach. Got it. Next question. Jackie, I'll start with you on this one. Jackie, before you accepted this role, you had other options, whether within the insurance industry or elsewhere. What specifically was it that made you forego better defined, less risky options to take on this challenge?
You know, that's a really great question because when you sent that question to us, I had to really reflect on that. And one of the main reasons that I took on this role is I reflected on the several decades that I've been in the business. And one of the things that I had done was spent a good portion of that time in a level of personal frustration. I knew what we needed to do to make the industry better for the people who need the insurance and want the insurance, and their lives are better protected because of it. But sometimes when you're in large corporations, egos and politics and agendas become more important than the customer. When I was presented the opportunity of joining Bestow, what I realized is this is a company full of people who have a singular focus, and that's on covering as many people as we can for life insurance, which I've seen the benefit of that throughout my career and the people that it serves so well. And so when you come in and you're faced with a group of wildly talented people who are all focused on the same thing, are willing to roll up their sleeves and work together toward a common goal, it made the decision pretty easy.
Great. Braden, how would you respond?
Yeah, for me, I think a big piece was a combination of things. I don't think the industry is necessarily not innovative, but the flip side is they still view the product very much like a technical good and not a consumer good. And one of the things that really drew me to Jetty was a desire to really alter that, a desire to really think differently about what you're trying to do or solve or what value proposition you're giving to your customer. And that was fascinating in and of itself. And I think in terms of the risks, I think all of us are at a point in our career where we deeply understand the business, both operationally, financially, technically, coverage-wise. And being able to build something from scratch, ground up, touch every nut and bolt on the machine, so to speak, is both, it's a fun challenge, it's an interesting opportunity, but also you're actually taking everything you've learned and done and being able to apply it. And it's a very rare opportunity because at a big carrier anymore, all you get to do is optimize around the edges. And certainly there's a lot of transformation to be had and there's a lot of room for improvement at big carriers, but really that opportunity to do it in a very sort of clean, ground up, fresh technology, latest tools way is extraordinarily rare.
And Kate, as not only the chief insurance officer, but a co-founder, I'm interested to hear your response.
Yeah. So I think I need to echo a little bit what Braden said in terms of in a big corporate environment, you're really tweaking around the edges. I actually left my last corporate role a couple of years ago. I was at Liberty. It's a great company full of good people. But it felt like we were adding a ton of complexity, around modeling. We were hiring statisticians from Google, doing great things around the edges that didn't necessarily serve customers at all. And so I left and I did a number of things, including starting a consulting firm that was focused on product innovation for property and casualty. And my co-founder, Jay Grayson, was actually a client. And he had this idea for how to better reach modern customers who don't own a lot of assets, but really feel a pervasive sense of uncertainty. And that's really what it was. It kind of like grabbed me right here. I've always felt like life is inherently unfair, and those of us who work in insurance have the privilege of making life more fair, right? And so this idea of really shaping the product around how people live in the modern economy kind of grabbed my imagination. And there are just moments in your life where you have a choice to make one way or the other, and I chose to leap, and I've been grateful that I have ever since that day.
Great stories. Next question, we'll start with Braden. It's kind of a two-part question. What has been the biggest challenge for you in your role thus far? And also, what accomplishments have made you particularly proud, whether personal or enterprise-wide?
Yeah, boy, the hardest challenge, frankly, stat reporting. Yeah, like translating all the data into these statistical reports for the state agencies is a real pain. But honestly, I think part of the challenge is having to do so much yourself. Having to really, I talk about being able to touch every nut and bolt is, well, guess what? This car, this machine isn't going to build itself. And when you're venture backed, there's always an incredible focus on what's the priority, what gets the engineering resources, how many resources do we have in general. So I think figuring out how to be both, we have these values of rigor and scrappiness, figuring out how to be both rigorous and scrappy at the same time, like working really intelligently. And so I think that's just an ongoing challenge. In terms of what I'm most proud of, I think broadly just the business we've built. I think it's an incredible sort of achievement in general to build the technology, get to market, negotiate really strong partnership, with the backing of Munich Re Digital Partners, which is like obviously a very strong partner for us to have. Having the brand presence, winning deals in the real estate channel, which is big for us. And it's sort of earning your right to continue growing, earning your right to raise more venture funds, earning your right to have a place at the table. And I think that's really what I'm most proud of.
Terrific. Jackie, same question. Greatest challenge, greatest accomplishment.
It's interesting, and I think we all talk about this, is how challenging it is to establish a company. People who work in life insurance companies that have been around hundreds of years certainly take for granted the nuts and bolts of everything. This is how I describe it to people. For most people who are in the industry, you're jumping on a streetcar. The streetcar's been moving up and down the street for years. You get on, you add your value, and at some point you get off the streetcar. We have to build the streetcar from scratch, and then we get to ride it. So that's one of the biggest challenges that we face. And then the second part, which what am I most proud of? I'm actually really proud of the co-founders and what their vision is. Very few people try to crack into this business. It's got a high barrier to entry, and to find two such gifted people as I have in my leaders, Melbourne O'Banion and Jonathan Abelman, their vision is impressive. And what is also super impressive is their passion for the business. They understand what many companies have forgotten, which is why we're in this business. The other thing is to be part of such a talented leadership team is really, it's a gift, and it's something that I don't take for granted. And I'm so proud to be part of a group of people who are doing the right thing for the right reasons in the right way.
Thank you. Finally, Kate.
Yeah, in terms of what's most difficult, I think I'd echo some of what Jackie and Braden said, but most specifically, especially perhaps because we're a bit earlier stage than either Bestow or Jetty, the hardest thing is that I spend so much of my day doing things that I just don't know how to do, right? Yeah, the fundraising process was new to me. Establishing a company, buying health insurance, my goodness, it shouldn't have been as hard as it was, but it was. And so it's humbling, you do things that you've never done before, you do them quickly without the support of a major company, and that means that you mess up a lot, right? So yes, it's been a bit of a lesson in humility, I suppose, but it's been a wonderful learning experience as well. And in terms of what I'm most proud of, I'm most proud that we've actually convinced a great team of people to come along with us on this journey, right? It's one thing to sit with your co-founder and say, do we have a great idea? Yes, we do, right? But when you start bringing people on from other disciplines, product designers and technical folks, and they're as excited by the vision as you are, that's when it sort of seems real. So I'm proud of our team.
Great. Next question, Jackie, I'm going to start with you on this because I do know Melbourne and Jonathan so well. Assuming that your company's founders come from a completely different background, which is almost inevitably the case, how would you describe the ongoing interaction? And when it comes to their overall vision, what do you feel has been their kind of biggest reality check or biggest dose of reality when it comes to working within such a highly regulated environment?
Yeah, I'm very fortunate that both of them come from a financial services background. Jonathan comes from finances, worked for companies that did investments, and they're both serial entrepreneurs. So they really do understand the finances of business. Melbourne comes from having engagements in title insurance and in health insurance. So great for me that they come from that space. And so one of the interesting things that I have found that they do is challenge me about what's a regulation and what's a company rule. And it's shocking how many things that I took as regulations that really aren't regulations, and they're the result of some company's response to a lawsuit or a business rule that was put in place years ago that people just it became tribal legend that it was actually a regulation. I think the biggest challenge that we face in this business, but I think it's typical in most corporate America, is time. There's never enough time. You never quite estimate the real amount of time it's going to take to do things. And so time is never your friend. And I would say that's the biggest reality check we've gotten along the way, is that you try to estimate how long it will take to get from point A to point B, but you're never quite right. So that's been the biggest challenge.
Yeah. Kate, again, a little bit different for you as one of the co-founders, but
Yeah.
you kind of understand where we're coming from. There's the vision, and then there's what's possible.
Yeah, well, our situation's a little bit different too, in that Jay and I are both insurance people, although with different backgrounds. Mine, as you mentioned before, is exclusively in product management, and Jay's is about half in corporate finance and about half in customer experience. And we've actually found that to be, we both have really unique lenses on how to look at both our product and our consumers. And I think there's a lot of fertile ground there in kicking back and forth, a little bit like you were saying, Jackie, between what the product has to do because of the way it's written or the laws and rules and regulations, and then how we can better serve consumers and where there's flexibility and where there isn't. So it's been an ongoing conversation that I think has been really rich. Then in addition, both of us had roles where we had oversight over IT budgets or IT systems at various points in our career. So we have thoughts from the insurance side, but having a tech team that has a different background has actually introduced another layer of richness into the conversations. So yeah, it's we're keeping the vision alive here and working together to come up with something better than either of us could create alone.
Excellent. Braden?
Sure. So our founders are Mike Rudoy and Luke Kohler. I think one of the benefits for them is they both had a lot of experience in startups and also a bit of experience in consulting. So they brought both familiarity with raising funds, pitching VCs, starting and scaling companies, as well as what I would call sort of a pretty disciplined and structured framework that gets feed into you through the consulting experience. And in general, I think they had a very strong vision about the customer experience. So that was something they brought to the table sort of and really pushed in both the aesthetics and the approach and how we think about what we're trying to achieve. The biggest reality check, I think, probably came early, and it was actually part of what ultimately got me involved with Jetty was they were getting up to speed on the industry. They had no experience in insurance, and I'd say relatively little in financial services. And the first big discussion was, should we try to be a carrier? Should we try to be an agency? What did it take? And they invested the time to become insurance agents, both of them, as part of their learning, their willingness to sort of get their arms around it. And I think at that point they realized they were just scratching the surface of the whole technical dimension. And so a little bit, it's always a question of regulation, like what does it really take to get a product approved? How creative can you be before the regulators say no? And then surprisingly, I think for all of us is we're heavily focused on the real estate channel and renters. There's a whole other set of regulation or aspects or municipal laws around fair housing, fair credit, the use of security deposits that shape sort of what we can and can't do. And so that challenge, I think even for me, is day to day, well, what are we navigating? How do we plot that course?
Mm-hmm. We'll wrap up with probably my favorite question. What advice or guidance would you have for those who are interested in working for a startup in this space? And Braden, let's start with you on this one.
Sure. I think I'm assuming that the audience for this answer is really people who are perhaps in the insurance industry and looking to go to a startup. And I think the thing for them is it is a great opportunity to get responsibility and exposure to a broad range of disciplines that you probably wouldn't get at a carrier. And I would argue that when you look at big carriers, it's very siloed. People grow up in a journeymanship or apprenticeship model where they start as a claims adjuster and they move up to be chief claims officer. They start as an underwriter and they become the chief underwriting officer. It's very rare that someone gets an opportunity to define product, look at coverage terms, then actually think about claims or handling or even operational efficiency across any of those dimensions, let alone compliance or other pieces, or looking at how do you negotiate a carrier partnership? How do you structure a fronting relationship? What is the reinsurance structure you're going to put in place? And having exposure, the opportunity to see all those things is really what joining an insurtech, certainly relatively early in your tenure or any point in your career in insurance is really interesting. And then I think, and I'll add a little dimension, which is if you're not an insurance person, please come, because part of what I say to people, as much as we're an insurtech startup, it's not about the insurance, it's about the customer, it's about the value proposition. And anything you can do to release the insurance technical view of the world to enable this. What is your problem? How can I solve it? Is it even an insurance product? Is it an alternative kind of financial service product? Is it actually not an insurance or financial service product at all? Is it actually some sort of service? And thinking more about how do you solve the pain point for the customer, of which one core toolkit really will be an insurance product or insurance capability. And so from that side, it's an interesting opportunity to see different ways to really approach the customer, really building an intense view on how do you build a company? How do you focus on the customer? How do you prioritize all the decisions and levers and operational choices to move that needle? And that in and of itself is an incredible experience.
Right. Kate.
Yeah. So I think, jumping into entrepreneurship is not kind of all or nothing. So my advice would be that somebody who's interested in going into the insurtech space, particularly somebody coming out of the insurance industry, should think really carefully about what stage of a startup that actually be comfortable in. So we're early stage, which means that roles are really relatively undefined. Everybody does everything, all hands on deck, and you're spending a lot of time with a small number of people, right? Companies that are much more established yet are still startups are going to have hundreds of staff members, more roles, probably more benefits, better defined job pathways. And so you've got to know yourself a little bit and understand your risk tolerance and understand that those environments are really, really different. The other thing I would say is you need to be really, really sure that you not only believe in the mission of the startup and you're excited about the role, but that you really like the people you're working with. It's kind of a cliche, but the highs are so much higher and the lows are so much lower in a startup. It's true. And so you want to make sure that you don't just think the people you're working with are good people, but that they're people you want to be sitting next to during those highs and lows. And the only way to figure that out is to spend some time with folks, maybe even more time than you would in a corporate environment. I wouldn't go through a couple of sets of interviews and decide that it's great. I'd ask to sit in on team meetings or to spend some time one-on-one with various members of the team, because that personal fit is so important. But most of all, I'd say just do it. I mean, insurance is a $1.2 trillion industry that's in the process of being reinvented right now, and it's an opportunity to be a part of something pretty exciting. Come join us.
Jackie.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's funny, when I started to talk to my friends in the industry, many of them wildly successful and talented people that I really respect, told them I was moving from the traditional corporate space to this startup. They said two things simultaneously almost. It was like, that is so cool. I could never do that. And so that was very telling, right? I think it's like anything you do in your life that's scary. If you don't take a chance, you're never going to know, right? I think what you have to do is you have to make a list of the pros and cons, talk about the potential risks and the potential payoffs. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. I think also you have to look at yourself in the mirror and decide whether you're ready to do this, because not everybody's made for it. The other thing that you really have to do, if you're single, you can make a lot of decisions about your life. But if you're not, you have to have a conversation with your significant other and say, are they ready for you to take this position as well? Because the highs are very high and the lows can feel kind of low sometimes. It's a humbling shift. You have to be willing to do things that you might have not done for many years. But if you take a look at it and you see at the end of the day that you're going to become a better and stronger leader, and that you're involved in changing an industry that you feel such passion and love for, and you're doing it to make what the industry a better industry, then it's hard to say no. And that's kind of the advice that I would give as well, is it is not for everyone, but for those who are willing to give it the try and take the risk, it's amazing. Come join us on the roller coaster ride. It's wonderful.
Terrific. That wraps up my questions for today. Anything else that any of you would like to add as kind of final thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'd just say it's a huge privilege to be in this industry at this point in time when there are so many changes and so much innovation going on. I think if folks are thinking about making the jump, now is the moment to do it. There's sort of a window, right, when you can take a chance and it might really allow you to build something new and different. And I do think that moment's now. So I wouldn't hesitate if you're thinking about jumping into the InsurTech space.
Great.
I would say, this is such an important business. We protect people's lives. We protect the things they care about. We help them make hard decisions, and we're there to guide them through sometimes the most difficult periods of their life. So if you can be part of something that's going to make the industry better, stronger, it's going to move it into the future and allow access to people how, when, and where they want to be served, then, what a great opportunity it is. And so I talk about this being a noble purpose we serve. And so, to change the industry and serve people better, I don't know if it gets much better than that.
Yeah, I think it is an incredibly interesting and pivotal time in the industry, especially in the US. I think in many ways, the insurance industry has sort of lagged all the consumer finance, all the consumer technology, all the pure consumer goods or retailing industries. And it's really at this sort of inflection point of transformation. And it's a unique time to be a part of it. I think it's a unique time actually to be a carrier. I think both, as an InsurTech, there's a wild amount of flourish. There's a lot of ideas and there's a lot of things starting, and it's interesting to be a part of it and build these different things. And I think what's also going to be fascinating as a carrier to be able to look across all of this. And at no time before has the industry had the opportunity to plant as many of their own seeds. And if you sort of think of it almost as one big terrarium as opposed to all of us being independent, it is an opportunity to see this grow and see what's going to be successful and sort of plot a course forward about how, is there industry consolidation that will come from it? Is there an acquisition strategy? Are these new companies ways to sort of bring innovation or evolution back into the company? So I think for InsurTechs, it's incredibly vibrant. I think as a carrier, it really is, it's time to start thinking about, how does this impact us? Where will we take these things? How can we benefit from all of this? And how do we enable it? Where do we place bets? So that's a pretty fascinating time.
Great. Well, thanks to all of you for spending time with me and for the informative Q&A. Most of all, thanks for what you're doing for the industry. I think it's terrific. I'm looking forward to following your successes, and thanks for also sending the message to folks outside of the industry that this is really a terrific time to join forces with the technology solutions side of the industry. Incredible amount of innovation taking place. Thank you all again. Wish you the best of success.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye.